Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Joined today by Mark, Ostrander, Grant Turner. What's up, boys? How is everyone?
Doing well, brother.
Just got back from Arizona, back in Iowa. Arizona's nice to have a pool, 300 feet from the back door and hot tub, but I'm back in paradise here in Ankeny, Iowa. So let's talk wrestling.
You literally made me spit up, GT. You went Ankeny, Iowa's paradise from Arizona. So, oh my God.
Well, it is in Iowa, isn't it, Grant?
Oh, yep, absolutely. Watch Field of Dreams.
I mean, we have thunderstorms, we have hail, we have snow, we have 70-degree weather all in 1 week. I mean, you can't have hail.
We did have hail in St. Louis this week. Kind of crazy.
Did you?
Woke up. Yeah, my power went on and off like 4 times in like 12 minutes, so that was fun. So where I live, it's pretty open. It gets pretty windy. But anyway, all right, let's start with some good news. Peyton Robb from Nebraska was facing some really serious stuff. We didn't talk about it, guys, either on or off the air, but we thought he did the semi-slide, went from like the semis to 6th. He defaulted out. We didn't know if he was hurt. We've seen guys in the past just not want to wrestle. It turns out it was neither of those. That basically he has necrotizing fasciitis, a very dangerous flesh-eating bacteria. And my understanding is Whitlake had it as well from Oklahoma State. So let's go small picture, then big picture. The small picture is he's okay now. He'll need to recover. It could have been super dangerous, like loss of limb kind of thing. They did a GoFundMe. The wrestling community is amazing. Whenever I think GT, you and I are on social media a lot more than Mark is, and we see a lot of the idiots out on social media just chirping away about nothing and being critical, but the wrestling world has a lot of amazing people in it that are quiet and step up when they need to and are needed. And so that was an amazing thing to see. I texted with Mark Manning and he said he's on his way to recovery. We talked about, I was texting with the Pure and Clean guys about how to keep prevent this from happening. And obviously they want you to use their product and, they're a sponsor of USA Wrestling. But part of it is just the foot traffic on those mats. Like you don't have to be on the floor, but 10 minutes before time, coaches are walking around on the mats. People singing the national anthem are walking around on the mats. Color guards are walking around on the mats. And these are all people wearing street shoes. And so and they're all on a TV schedule. So it's impossible to sort of clean those mats again. And they have to use those laser things because you can't clean it with like some sort of cleanser and water because you got to wait for the mats to dry. So hopefully somebody can figure out a solution to this. GT, I know that's Nebraska's not real far from you guys. Had you heard anything else than what I just said?
No, just that immediately during the tournament, I know that Whitlake went to the hospital and the team went and saw him the day after. And then, of course, Peyton Robb's situation that occurred. It's scary stuff, right? So this is one of the things about wrestling that is, it's difficult to talk about because there is such a high degree of like skin infections and or things that happen like that. But this is like above and beyond. I mean, if you look at the types of situations that both of those athletes had, basically, one was fighting for his life. I don't know exactly what Whitlake, had or whatever, but it's scary stuff. So, I'm glad that both those guys are feeling better and they're through the woods on that.
And Mark, before I get to you, I think this is the same thing that Milner had that took him out of the tournament. He just got it at a different time frame, but that's my understanding. So, Marco, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just glad for the family, for the universities that both their wrestlers are okay. Hopefully Milner's okay because that changed that bracket, obviously. So, like we said, David, unless we have a solution, don't really want to spend too much time on the problem if we can't figure out a way to fix it. And right now, I'm not really sure how you fix it, except for keeping people off the mats completely. Maybe we have another area that we do the national anthem. Coaches and wrestlers before wrestling are not allowed to be on the mats.
I got a solution for the national anthem and the color guard. You let's lay down a carpet when they walk out there. I know it might take 30 seconds more, but they walk out on that. They walk back on that. That's a simple solution. And I think the coaches, they either got to put on like those booties or something, or else put them in wrestling shoes. They wear those and they take them off and coach. Because you see plenty. Wrestling's a very unusual sport in that. And GT, I'm sure you still do this. Like you warm guys up. And a lot of times you're actually wearing wrestling shoes. Like before the finals, with as many as you guys had in the finals, maybe you or hey, and shout out to your boy Henderson. He had a birthday recently, right?
Yep.
So, but guys like you, Henderson, Reedy, maybe even Nick are still working out with the guys or warming up with them, and maybe you put on wrestling shoes. So there is a solution. It's not like there's rocket science and you can't figure it out. It's going to be inconvenient. But if it prevents somebody from going to the hospital and almost losing a leg, or it allows a John Milner, who came back, didn't have to come back, and stayed loyal, didn't go in the portal, and didn't get to wrestle.
Yep.
I think this needs to be looked at. So Anyway, the other huge news, it was very interesting. I was on a conference call with the National Wrestling Hall of Fame for that dual meet classic yesterday when everybody's phones started going off. Lou Rosselli resigned from OU. I actually texted Lou and, thanked him for his friendship and, obviously said, what a great coach I think he is and a great person. Lou's been a good friend to me. One year when I went to junior duels, he actually let me stay at his place while he was out of town. So a super smart guy about wrestling. The Ohio RTC at one point when he was coaching had 5 of the 7 back when there were 7 weight classes of the world team members were from that RTC. Didn't have great success at OU in terms of All-Americans. Had really good success 2 years in a row at the Big 12 tournament. So let's start with Mark. You can go first. Where do you think the 2 questions I'm going to ask you guys are? Where do you think Lou goes, and who do you think gets the OU job?
Oh man, I don't know where he goes. USA Wrestling, maybe the out in Colorado, possibly. I think that would probably be a pretty good fit for him. I don't know if he would go back to Ohio State and take over that club, the RTC there. It would be a good move for them to have him back because he did wonderful things for them. And who gets that job? I have no idea. I really don't. It's a good job. Oklahoma is a hotbed of wrestling. I would love to have that job if I was young and still coaching. So I don't know. Maybe one of the assistants that transferred in from Wyoming, David?
Deion Ware?
Because they got some transfers in there. So, I don't know.
Joe Castiglione, if you're looking at this, Mark Ostrander will take that job and lead you back to the promised land.
No, if I was younger, David, you missed that part. I'm not. No.
I might have missed that part, but GT, that's the headline. That's a headline for today's podcast. Mark Ostrander is in the coaching portal.
There you go.
That's actually a good headline.
Good headline.
GT trying to hold back the laughter. All right. Yeah. Where does Lou go? We'll start with that, GT.
Well, I think this is one of the first dominoes to basically start the coaching carousel type situation that you have in a lot of other sports. I believe, OU is very highly sought after position. It is a historic program. They've done very well in the history of wrestling. So, it's a very, very probably sought after position. With them, basically going to the SEC, they're going to have some SEC money, but they'll stay in the Big 12 from what I've heard. So the conference will be the exact same. They're not moving anywhere. So it'll just depend on kind of who then potentially takes that job and then where that opening comes in. I don't know I think they would probably love to have him back at Ohio State in their RTC situation. And once again, I don't know Lou all that well, so I don't know, maybe maybe he takes a break, maybe he goes USA Wrestling, maybe he does some RTC stuff, maybe he does Olympic development. But from everybody that I've ever talked to about Lou Rosselli is that he's a great coach, and he's done a very good job on the international scene with the freestyle. So you never know.
Wasn't he in Snyder's corner when Snyder won the Olympics?
I believe so.
Yeah. So let's start with who OU gets. I mean, 3 or 4, I think, thoughts initially. Tion Ware. Okay, for people that don't know, he's an Edmond North guy, 4-time state champ, multiple-time national champ at OU. He's an Oklahoma guy. More and more of my life is working with people in Oklahoma. Oklahoma people really want Oklahoma people. Like that's important to them. He also brought in Buchanan. You could argue that Buchanan was scored more points at nationals in 22 than OU scored in all of 23. So that's not a criticism or a compliment. It's just math. Okay. So, and I think the argument for Ware is he's been an assistant for a long time. You learn the ropes, and he has connections and can recruit. It is hard to out-recruit John Smith in Oklahoma. I think that needs to be said. I think that's something that Lou figured out, that it's difficult. And when you can't get the best kids in Oklahoma, one of the things that we talk about is this. If you can get the best in-state kids, they cost less. We could go through all the economics about in-state and out-of-state tuition and these other things. But nobody bats 100% on recruiting. Nick Mitchell's a great coach. Every recruit he got did not pan out. Like, it just didn't happen. And he is now part of the human race. Everybody's like that. So the more you can get for the same amount of money, if your hit ratio is 40% and I recruit 10 guys and Mark recruits 15 guys and GT's able to get 20 guys all on the same money, GT's team is probably going to be the best. Number 2, Jared Frere. Okay, Olympic team member, OU guy, national champ, part of a top 10 program, an assistant coach. The assistant coach with him is Cody Brewer, also a national champ at Oklahoma, would have credibility in the state, comes from a program with credibility. Young guy, still probably good at recruiting. Assistant coaches do a lot of recruiting. Tony Roby's a great recruiter as well, so no, not giving that man his flowers, but would be able, I think, step in and make an impact. Matt Storniolo is an interesting one. A friend of mine who's a conspiracy theorist said, he told me when those guys went in the portal, which we'll get to, he's going to end up at OU, and those guys are going to follow him from the portal. So that's an interesting theory. He wrestled at OU and Penn State. He has done a great job at Northwestern. And no disrespect to OU, but OU is easier to get in academically than Northwestern. So the recruiting pool is bigger. Okay. Like Northwestern does not recruit Illinois guys. Northwestern recruits guys that can get into the school. Like the Princetons, the Stanfords of the world. So that's a different game. And then Damian Hahn, and he was apparently up for it last time and just had a national finalist, right, with Tanner Sloan.
Yep.
Not considered, South Dakota State is not considered like a blue blood program. Hasn't been good for 100 years like some of these other programs. They have invested in the program in terms of facilities and things like that. And I think part of the reason that they invested in that program is because of Damian and his staff. And I don't remember who I was doing the podcast with when Bono left there to go to Wisconsin. But I think there was a concern if you're just a wrestling person that South Dakota State would sort of fall off, that Bono and Reeder had done a great job there. They were taking their jump around mentality up to Wisconsin. And that hasn't happened. South Dakota State, I think, scored about the same amount of points as Wisconsin this year. And so that would be, that'd be another guy to be considered. I think one of the main things that I know for a fact, somebody who was offered the job and didn't take it before this was announced. And I can just say this, like I heard this directly from the source. The OU is not committed to staying inside the OU family.
Okay.
So that person told me that story just as a friend, so I'm not going to pass along that stuff. I mean, the other interesting person would be like a Kendrick Maple, right? Like Kendrick Maple, I think, has a lot to do with Keegan O'Toole. I mean, Brian Smith has basically said so. OU national champ. You know, Mizzou churns out guys that are assistant coaches that go on to be coaches at other places a lot. Brian Smith has a system that these coaches are able to use. So, any other thoughts, like now that we've talked about that, anybody else that pops to mind that you guys can think of?
I guess I could throw it out there. What about Cal?
I believe that call was,
be a good
no, I
move.
believe that call was made. I believe the call to Cunningham was made too.
Okay. So, yeah. He's going to stay at Penn State, huh? Huh. It's amazing.
Well, they're building. And it's like,
I know.
think
They're getting better.
Nick Mitchell's going to stay at Grandview for another year too. They're
building. They got some money in their RTC too. They've got an endowment that, helps the kids, get by. So that's good news. I just thought I'd throw it out there, David. It'd be a good get for Oklahoma. So
that's really funny. I mean, once again, I think this program has financial capabilities that maybe a lot of other programs, maybe like in the mid-major categories, may not have. With Big 12 and basically now some really big football money and all of that kind of stuff that drives a lot of college athletics right now. But I think, with other people that have, either come or gone from that program, we've talked about, like Maple, Brewer, Frere, Tion, a lot of the OU Sooner guys that are out there coaching. Hayeswinkle's currently there. There's a lot of different ways that this program could go. And I think opening up that search to OU and then non-OSU family or even Oklahoma people would probably be a good idea. Once again, the way that college athletics is and with the portal, like you can do a lot of different things, and in-state recruiting is in-state recruiting. You just got to be good at it, and also being able to get other people to buy into where you're at. And once again, wrestling is growing across the entire country, so being able to recruit the Northeast, California, the Midwest, the South, the Southeast. You can find talent about anywhere, and it's been proven multiple times now that we've had a national champion from Northern Colorado that is from Colorado, like he stayed home, did all that. Tanner Sloan basically making the finals from SDSU, basically an Iowa kid. So there's just all sorts of different kind of plays there. But I think you'll see a lot more head coaches than you probably thought you would see, maybe trying to get this particular position, even though they've had a lot of success at their current institutions.
Yeah, I mean, like okay, I just watched the basketball Final Four and then the football national championships. There's certain schools that have always been good at a sport, like at least it feels like it, and are committed to being good at that sport. Like Duke is not committed to being good at football, but they are in basketball. Like there are certain schools that are football schools. Alabama was really good at both, but they're traditionally a football school. So I can tell you this: at Merrimack, we were good in spite of our administration, not because of them. Like they were a mess. Like I know Iowa Central wants to be good at wrestling. Okay, so that's good. That's great. Like I'm not saying it makes it easy, but it makes it in certain situations, it makes it easier to be good. Like, hey, you talk to your AD, you talk to your president, we need this. Okay, well, we're going to work to make that happen because we care. OU is a school that can happen, and they've been good, and they're in a state that wrestling matters. So I think that's an interesting part of it. Two other parts. If you're an SEC school, there's extra money you can give kids that if your school can afford it, you can give them, and it does not count against your 9.9. So them going to the SEC will actually make it easier to recruit kids. Like, let's just call it $100. It's not $100. I know how much it is, but if it's $100, I can take $100 off Grant's scholarship and put it on this thing. He's exactly the same. And if I do that with 30 kids, I've just created $3,000 extra to recruit. So that's important. I think the other important thing is this. They're not going to hire a guy that isn't working right now. Okay. So this is the beginning of the carousel. Like whoever they hire, somebody like now we're moving. Like if they hire any of the names we talked about, now that person's got to be replaced. And now we're moving. And like I had somebody who I really respect, but I told them they were crazy. Like, I'll bet you there's not any big coaching moves this offseason. I'm like, you're out of your mind. This happens every year. Somebody's unhappy, something changes, or somebody, maybe they're not even unhappy. They just get bought out. This happens. This is the world. So anyway, I think I've said this before. There are certain weeks in our podcast where I wonder if we're going to have anything to talk about, and then just the world happens. And now there's an abundance of topics. It's like, for example, we were going to get into some of the U.S. Open entries, and I don't think we have to do that this week. There's plenty of other things to talk about. So portal news. I think we talked about some of these guys: Seth Nevels, Slavikowski, Bernie Truax, Isaac Olenek, Lucas Davison, Jordan Decatur, Chris Cannon, Mitchell Messenbrink, and Joe Colon is no longer coaching at Northwestern, which may or may not have led to any of those guys leaving Northwestern. GT, I'll start with you. Biggest impact guy in the portal.
I'm going to cop out and say Buchanan will be the biggest impact transfer, rather because he was still in the portal, but now he's at OU. I think he's going to be the biggest impact swing variable for whoever steps in. I'd probably say after that, I mean, returning All-American Lucas Davidson would be a huge pickup for any program. Just with his ability to go into grad school, basically a bona fide All-American caliber heavyweight. I think those are the two guys that I would say probably have the biggest impact in the transfer portal for the upcoming season.
So having said that, so you bring up a very interesting guy, and I saw Mark make kind of a surprise face. Do we think Buchanan stays, and where do we think Lucas Davison ends up? And if they both end up at OU, how interesting would that be? So, I don't want to speculate until I know the coach, because the coach could be a very, he's going to have to resell all of those talented recruits that are at OU currently. So I think it's kind of a wait and see thing for all of those kids as well, because there's a lot of great talent that's in the room at Oklahoma that are very young. I can't remember what the ranking was right off the top of my head, but they have a ton of guys that are extremely talented in the past two recruiting classes that either redshirted this year or were freshmen this year. So I think it just really depends on if Buchanan stays, on who they bring in. Marco, same question.
Yeah, Davidson, to me, I wasn't looking back, this past year during the season about people that left and transferred like Grant did. But I agree with Grant. I mean, those are your two high-profile guys. Both have placed high at the national tournament. Davidson plays fifth this year, and then the guy that won it is graduated, so he's done. So now, if you start the preseason, he's the number, fourth-ranked kid starting the year out. I mean, that's a lot of points to have on your roster to get, help you out at the end of a dual meet. So that's, to me, he's the biggest yet that isn't gotten yet. Let's put it that way. I mean, I understand that Buchanan, is already at Oklahoma. He could transfer again, obviously, with the coaching change. But right now, I'd say Davidson, to me, would be the biggest get that's on that board. And there's still guys that we don't know about, that haven't actually put themselves on the board. Griffith talked about it at the national tournament. He wants to wrestle maybe another year, but he's not sure where. So, he would be a huge get also. So it's going to be fun to see what happens.
So speaking of guys that aren't in the portal, but I'm almost sure is going in the portal, and I think I know where it's going to end up. I think Ferrari might be the biggest guy in terms of impact, right? Like Ferrari would be the preseason number one if Mark and I were doing the rankings, because he beat Tanner Sloan and Buchanan the last time he wrestled them. And then I think Bernie Truax is a guy we got to look at, right? Like he's placed, three different times, three different weights. He weighs less than 190 pounds. So he could go 84 or 97. So, I mean, that's a great problem to have, right? Like a guy that's probably going to take sixth at worst and has weight class flexibility. The other thing is I looked up yesterday on Matt Scouts, the top 200 final recruits of 2023. And OU had, please don't tell me if I'm wrong, somewhere between 3 and 6 kids on that list. So those kids could potentially go back in the, not even the portal. They could just decommit because they haven't gone. So that's a big impact. And I think of my friend Brian Piccolo and his son Tate, who's a freshman down there at OU, was a big recruit. What happens with him? Like, they got to hire a coach fairly quickly because these kids are going to get restless. And to GT's point, there's some good kids there. And, they had a bunch of qualifiers. I mean, some of them are older, like Prada's gone, stuff like that. But there's some younger guys too, like a Moses Schwartz. I think he's got a year left. Josh Heinzelman qualified. They got guys that didn't score a ton of points in nationals, but are like, that round of 32, round of 24 guy. Maybe a culture change. They move up from 32 to 24, 24 to 16. They get somebody in the round of 12. I mean, that's how you got to build the program. So, all right. So let's go. We kind of have hinted around this. Let's go to who's coming back. So this is a shout out to Earl Smith from Intermat. This was his article. I just copied and pasted it into our Google Doc. I did not do this work, so I don't want the only thing I did was format it and color code it. But, and he and I talked, I think there was like maybe Kyle Valencia or somebody was missed, but for the most part, it's dead on the nuts accurate. So we'll walk through each weight. The green are the returning All-Americans. The blue are the round of 12 guys, and yellow are round of 16. So 25 has the least returning All-Americans. Ramos, Anthony Noto, Eddie Ventresca, all 4 round of 12ers are back. 3 round of 16ers are back, including McKee, who's All-American before. And then the guy to really, I should put him in here, is Richie Figueroa. Because I think I put this in our group text. Let me ask you this, Mark. Where would you rank Figueroa?
Well, I know what he did last year, so I would probably rank him right around somewhere around where McKee's at right now, 9 or 10. I would probably rank him behind McKee because McKee has been an All-American just to start the year out. I know how talented he is. I know he beat Ramos at Vegas. I know he's probably good enough to win it. But until you actually go through a whole season, we got to find out. I mean, that's how we've always done our rankings before. So that's probably where I would put him.
Well, we did make an exception for like Gable Stevenson coming out. There are exceptions, right? I mean, You're right. That was our rule. So I'll say this, and then GT, as somebody that didn't do the Sunday night exercise with Mark and I, you can tell me when we're right or wrong. To me, Figueroa goes at 1 of 3 spots. He goes at 4, like behind Ventresca and above the round of 12 guys. He goes at 8, below the round of 12 guys and above the round of 16, or he goes at 11. Yeah, behind, the round of 16 guys and above the round of 24 guys. I certainly think 11, in my opinion, is his basement. When you beat Ramos, he also beat Unger. Okay, so he beat right now the number 1 and number 7 guy. I think 11 is the worst he can be. But where would you put him, GT?
Yeah, I'm brand new to rankings, so I've had like less than a year, and I'm like racking my brain, and I'm like, okay, what? I mean, because also like in freestyle, a lot of that like talent doesn't necessarily transcend to folk style or vice versa, right? You could be a really good folk styler, or you could be a really good freestyler. You could be really good at Greco. You could be crap at folk style, or any way that you want to toss up that. So you can't like basically look at like, hey, what is he going to do over the summer? He has really good freestyle prowess. And then he goes and beats, McKee, Steve-O, and Ramos in freestyle this year. And then you come back to the folk style season and you're like, well, he's beat all of them. Well, it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily equate to whatever the season, right? So as a red shirt, you kind of have to a little bit of that. But I also know that, he didn't wrestle a collegiate schedule last year. So I'd probably put him in that non-top 8, but not below 16 category. And that's about the best, I don't know, amateur version of what I could describe as, I wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt to say, hey, you're a top 8 guy, All-American status right away. You're probably a qualifier in the round of 16 or blood round type guy. And then you can basically prove yourself from there, knowing that you've already done something really talented as a red shirt. That's kind of where I would put a lot of those type of talented redshirt freshman kids.
And I know you're semi-joking about not having done this, but it does make an interesting conversation, because if you put him on that line between Unger and McKee, Mark and I would then argue he's got to be above Unger because he beat him head-to-head in folk style. Okay? And so then if you go, well, okay, if he goes above Unger, does he go above all the other guys in that round of 12? But then also McKee's been an All-American multiple times. So I would guess he's going to be ranked for sure. And now, again, I guess minus who else, is coming out of true freshman, all this other stuff, but he'll be in the top 12 for sure. And that's good news for Arizona State. 133, you have the number 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys. Dayton is, I think, to me, Vito, I guess, based on how well he did against Dayton, is sort of tier 1. I think Dayton is by himself in tier 2. And I think, to me, like a bunch of those guys, like pretty much, I would say Nagao to Lucas Bird are tier 3. I also heard that Ragusin might redshirt this year. So, that would change things. And it also shows you where Cannon is, 6, 9, 12. He'd be number 13 coming in. That'd be a nice pickup for somebody that gets him. GT, like when you look at this, it's super, super early. To me, I see Vito and Dayton in the finals again. Let me not make you pick somebody besides that, but maybe who's the most likely guy to take third or potentially break up the party in the finals of 133?
Well, I became a very big fan of Nagao throughout the season last year. I thought he was just kind of a dog mentality, like did really well, made himself kind of a force at that weight as, basically taking on Roman in Big Ten finals, basically, having, basically a top 8 seed. I think it was top 8 or top 9 seed at nationals. I really like him as kind of an outside, not necessarily an outside guy, but not a non-traditional pick. But I think that he's kind of coming into his own. He could be a definite problem there. I think probably saw flashes from Kai Orini. I thought he had a pretty good year. But you saw like flashes of him being, potentially a problem for a lot of people to deal with across the country. But I think this weight class could be, a potential like monster with some of those freshmen like Jesse Mendez coming in. Latona's been on the stand a ton already. So, but I would say Nagao and Arini are kind of the guys that I'd be looking at.
Marco, I know you were high on Mendez all year, high on Lucas Bird most of the year. Any other thoughts at 33?
Oh, Nagao, yeah, we had talked about him earlier in the year. I got to see him wrestle, and I saw how tough he was on top. And he's not going out there just to turn you. He's going out there to basically destroy your life. And you like that mentality when a kid goes out there and really puts the hammer to you. I think Mendez will probably redshirt next year from everything I've heard through Ohio State. And Bouzakis will come in. I don't think you miss anything with Bouzakis coming in. In fact, he's a different type of wrestler, and he could put you on your back from any position. So I like that. David, you were right on Arini. I didn't know much about him. I think he's awfully good. I think Latona's a stud, but I think your top tier guys are Vito and Dayton without a doubt. They're just they're in a different league than everybody else, and it's not that they can't be beat, obviously, but they're both kind of head and shoulders above everybody else in this weight. And I like Bird. I like Bird's mentality. He's a dog. So
GT, that's why Mark Ostrander is the Yoda of the show. He made sure to point out the one preseason pick I got right. So I really appreciate that as well. So not pointing out all the things I got wrong. So I'll take that. Yeah, the Buzakis thing was the one thing I was going to bring up. So Ohio State will probably drop points in the preseason because Mendez would have been like a top 4 guy, and Buzakis, you can't just rank him 4th. But at the end of the year, I think, Ohio State thinks they can get the same points out of him. Plus, they just got a verbal from Ben DeVino, and so they're trying to sort of stack these things up where some of these guys can move up and stuff like that. Okay, 41, you've got Alira's Woods, Bo Bartlett, Grant's adopted stepson, Lachlan McNeil, Clay Carlson, Brock Hardy, Dylan D'Amelio, all back. So basically the top 6 and number 8, Cole Matthews, who was the preseason number 1 coming in this year, Casey Swiderski, who started the year strong, finished the year strong. And then you've also got some really good guys, like if you look at like Ryan Jack, Vince Cornella, Moses Schwartz, Tom Crook, these all guys that were ranked higher than the top 24 this year. And then Carter Young, who was super banged up at Nationals, Cleveland Belton, the transfer. So this is an interesting weight. Bartlett finally got to wrestle 141. Brock Hardy, like we just talked about him, may not have finished 6th if he was able to wrestle on the back. I mean, he got what he got, but like if he was a guy that, say, beat Bartlett, McNeil, or Carlson, I think none of those results would have surprised us. So, Mark, any thoughts here on 41? We'll keep it moving because we got about 20 minutes left when we get through all these.
I would say if I was making a pre-preseason, I would pick Bartlett to win it because that's just what Penn State does. Their kids just keep getting better and better. I could see him winning it at, being the 3rd seed right now. I still think Real Woods is probably the most talented of the group. I'm not going to change that right now. Brock Hardy's better than 6, without a doubt. He, I think had a rib injury at the national tournament and went out there and tried to compete with it. So you got to give him credit. He's a stud. And then Cole Matthews, not the season he wanted to have, and I could see him coming back next year and just being an absolute terror. I could.
Yeah. GT?
Yeah, I think Real Woods, Bo Bartlett, Hardy, McNeil. They're and basically that whole All-American group right there, Clay Carlson. Just once again, I think to Mark's point, like you could have a national tournament and have all those guys kind of mix and match themselves up, and anything between, 1st to basically 10th. Alira's kind of ran through everybody this year, so I'd put him at the very, very top of the pile. I think Woods also has that ability to basically run through a lot of different people. Bo Bartlett, what a run, what a great tournament he had, really looked great. McNeil, like basically kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody really knew about him or never really thought.
Except you.
That's because I've seen him do a little bit more international stuff. And then he, basically his style of wrestling transcends very well from freestyle to folk style. He has a very, very good style that both basically on his feet looks slick, does a good job on top, does enough to be able to make sure that he gets some ride time, gets some turns. But yeah, Cole Matthews, returning finalist. I think he bounces back. He gets back up on the podium. And then I think, Cale Happel could do a very good job with another year.
Yeah.
I like him out of the Big 12 as well.
49, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 are back. 3 round of 12s, 2 round of 16s. I think Gomez is a very troublesome round of 16 guy for people. Pinheiro, round of 24 guy. And then you got to remember Ridge Lovett. So I'll ask, I've been alternating, but Mark, I'm going to ask you this first because it's a rankings question. I would rank Ridge Lovett number 1 in the preseason.
Agreed, 100%.
Okay. Then I'm going to go GT. So I think this is an interesting way.
It is.
Because I think this is not a way to pick like you can't sort of set and forget the finals like you sort of can at 33, right? Like I think 90% of the public would pick Vito and Dayton in the finals. Not saying we're all right or wrong. I mean, we all picked Spencer to make the finals this year. We were all wrong, but I think there's a consensus. Here, there's a ton of arguments for a lot of guys. Like you could argue down to Panero Johnson. So finalists at 149 GT, and remember, Ridge Lovett is on the board.
You think that Ridge Lovett should be the number 1 ranked wrestler in the nation coming out preseason?
Yes, and we'll tell you why. He took second the year before, and he beat Sasso head-to-head.
Still garbage. Guy was out last year.
Where would you rank him? No, that's fine. Where would you rank him?
Maybe 4th. He didn't wrestle last year. So, I mean.
What would you do? What are you going to do with Buchanan?
Same thing. Buchanan didn't wrestle last year. I'd probably put him at like 4 or 5.
Where are you going to put Gable Stevenson if he came back?
If he didn't wrestle last year, same thing. Have him go 3rd, probably 3rd.
Okay. You're consistent. Like, okay.
I mean, but the thing is, like, you take a year off. I mean, like, it doesn't guarantee you anything to be like the number 1 ranked guy. And then the way that the college wrestling scheme looks right now with, once again, this is my own personal soapbox, with medical forfeits, people hiding seeds, people trying to like run away from competition, people not going to opens or not wrestling really, really tough stuff. I mean, you get a guy that, like, when we were talking about, I'll use this as an example just briefly, we talked about Plot. If Plot just basically ran away from everybody, he could have probably had the number 2 seed in the nation, but he ended up choosing to wrestle like normal wrestlers would. Yeah. Like go wrestle duels, go wrestle people. And he ended up having a couple of losses. But once again, like, do you hide and run away from people just so you can get the number 2 seed at nationals? Or do you go wrestle the competition?
I want to make sure none of us are implying that Ridge Lovett hid.
No, not at all. Not
implying. That tone's going that way. I know you're not saying that. Yeah. I mean, they redshirted him for whatever reason. They redshirted him. Maybe it's because
that's totally fine.
Yeah,
totally agree. If you wanted to take a year for Olympic red shirt, or if you wanted to take an injury red shirt, does not matter. I think the point that I'm trying to convey is that, like, from year to year, it's very difficult to have that transition come over the top. I mean, once again, if you're a previously All-American, yeah, you probably need to be ranked as an All-American coming back that next year, regardless if you sat out or not. But I just don't think that because you sat out, you deserve the number 1 spot, even though you very well could be the number 1 guy. It's just, that's a year that you didn't get to compete.
To be fair,
now, which again, that puts a lot of subjectivity into rankings, which I know that you guys don't like to be able to do.
Yeah. So one of the hard things about rankings, and then we'll figure out who you think is going to make the finals, is you want to have a set of rules you follow. And so to us, head-to-head and placing is really important. So if Sasso took second and Lovett took second in back-to-back years and A beat B, that's where we would do it. So, but you're right. I mean, you're not wrong. There's be somebody else that will not do that, will not rank them. So Mark has problems with network, so it's a perfect time, GT, to ask you. He's back, it looks like. Who are your finalists at 149?
I will probably take Caleb Henson and Shane Van Ness.
Yeah, Van Ness's comeback story from that tournament, like, I think he'll be behind less this year. So Mark is fading in and out. Mark, do we have you? Finalist at 149. I'll hang up and listen.
I'm going to go with Gomez, and I'm going to go with Rich Lovett. I think if Gomez would not have gotten hurt this year, David, I think he would have been in the finals against Yanni. I think he had everybody's number, and then when he took that knee injury, it just put him back so far he just couldn't get there. So if he's healthy, finalist.
Yeah. GT Gomez made the Mexican national team. Like, he's in the World Championships for Mexico, and Keyson Clark is in the World Championships for Germany, correct?
That is correct. So Austin will then go to the Pan Am Games or the Pan Am Championships, I believe, right after the U.S. Open, compete there.
Yeah.
Basically, which then basically you have to compete in your Continental to have a spot at the World. So there you go. And then he'll be representing Mexico at those, along with Alexis as well.
Yeah, there you go. Who's up with you guys, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm sure I'll retract this later, but Ridge Lovett and Pinheiro Johnson. Next topic. 157. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are back. So everyone but O'Connor. All 4 round of 12s are back. And 3 of the round of 16s are back. So super loaded weight. I'm not sure who we would pick at this. I just think like one of the more interesting subjects here with Penn State, they bring back a ton of points is, does Levi Haynes move up? If he moves up, then what happens with Facundo? Mark has suggested Carter Starachi might move up and Aaron Brooks would move up. I think it's way easier for them to go get a guy in the portal like a Truax and just leave those guys at the weights where they're killing people. So without a lot of fanfare, Mark, finalist at 157.
I'm going to go, I don't know. I'm going to go Humphreys from Lehigh. I really liked him. I thought he was an absolute beast. And I'm going to go with Haynes from Penn State. They just keep getting better and better.
GT?
I've been calling this dude's name for 3 years. I'm going Jared Franick. And I'm going to go Levi Haynes.
I would like to see a rematch of the quarterfinals of Levi Haynes and Bryce Andonia. I don't know if that'll happen, but that was a fire match. A little bit of controversy. So, and Andonian's one of my favorite guys I've ever interviewed down there at the tournament. So there's certainly some bias there. 165, everybody but Quincy Monday's back, 3 round of 12s back, 4 round of 16s back. Just for the sake of brevity, I'm going to assume you guys jump in if you think Keegan O'Toole or David Carr are not going to make the finals. All right, keep it moving.
What about Caleb Fish from Michigan State?
Okay, next topic.
Right.
Oh, I forgot as well. Ja'Cory Teemer's back at 157. So GT, I'm picking Ja'Cory Teemer to make the finals.
I mean, we're talking about this on April 6th, boys. So this is the way too early, way too hyped NCAA tournament 11 months out.
Yes, guaranteed to be accurate. Get the money in now. Yeah. Okay, so GT, here's a real question. Carter Starachi's talking about making the Olympic team and winning an Olympic gold medal. I don't know if you have any inside information on this. I don't know what weight he goes. Okay, he seems to be like a big human being at 174 pounds. I don't know that he could make 162.8. That seems difficult to me. Okay, and Dake is in the room. If he goes up to 189.2, he seems small for that weight. Plus David Taylor's in the room. So I won't ask you if you think he beats Dake or Taylor. Just let me ask you this. Do you think he could make 74 kilos?
I don't believe, I think he would go up to 86. Okay. I mean, that's just me personally, because he's not terribly tall, but within 1 year, I don't think you can shrink your body that much and have a very successful run.
Right.
That's just me personally. Once again, I don't know Carter that well. I don't know what he weighs. I don't know how he feels. I don't know how well he cuts weight, any of those type of things. But if he wants to make a world team and an Olympic team, I believe that the best opportunity for him to be able to do that would be at 86 kilos, because I just don't think he can make the weight down to 162 and then go weigh in, basically back to back. I would feel more comfortable with his MMA transition going to 170 pounds, where I think that he would be at the same weight as like all of those gentlemen, which he then called out on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. If he's making 174 on a 1 or 2 hour weigh-in, 171 on a 36-hour weigh-in is no problem at all. Okay. And it's one set, just so people know, you only got to make scratch if it's a title fight. Everyone else gets a pound. So, or if you're a main event, for people that are, you can, if it's a main event, non-title fight, you still got to make scratch. And also those are 5-round fights. You know, he'll be fighting 3-round plus 1 fights for a while. So GT, let me ask, or I mean, Mark, let me ask you a different question here. I feel like Strachey is tier 1, Foka and Mackay are tier 2. Do you see anyone else? A, do you agree? And B, if A, do you agree? And B, if you don't, who do you see cracking that top 3?
Brands was beating the living daylights out of Foka at the end of the first period, and then chose down and got ridden and pretty much demolished. But besides that, I think Brands is going to be there. But I still think those are your top 4 guys right now.
Okay. 84, Brooks, Kekheisen, Hidley, Munoz, Gavin Kane. Mark is leaving us, walking off into the cornfields of Field of Dreams. Salazar's round to 12, 3 round to 16 guys, GT. Let me ask you a different question here. Let's say Truax goes somewhere at 184. So here's what I would tell you. I would rank him 4th. Because he took 4th, okay? That's higher than 6 for Munoz. Now, Munoz defaulted out, so you could make an argument he should be behind Munoz. But I would rank him definitely above Gavin Kane, considering he placed higher and he's coming down a weight instead of up a weight. So, A, where would you put Truax? And B, what do you think his ceiling is at that weight?
I think he's in the mix with all of those guys. And I agree with you. Kind of in the preseason ranking, I'd have him at at probably that same location that you've discussed. Like a 4-5, depending upon how you feel about Munoz, if they've ever wrestled, which I don't know if they ever have. I wouldn't have thought so, but I could be completely off on that. But I feel like that he's earned the right to be in that same category there. But I think that because of what we've discussed is that he was weighing in at like 187 all season or whatever, that I think that he would transition to 84 pretty well.
Yeah.
The problem that I think about the weight class at 184 is all of those guys are pretty much tried and true 84 pounders. Brooks, Kekheisen, Hidley, Munoz. I mean, those are solid 184 pounders that have proven themselves at that weight class over the past year. So probably past 2 years for all of those guys.
Top 3 for sure. Top 3 for sure.
But yeah, I think he transitions to 84 very well nationally.
Yeah. So 84 is an interesting weight because you only have 3 guys that are sort of multiple time All-Americans. So that, that makes it, you feel like clearly somebody who didn't place last year is going to sneak, going to place it this way. I mean, you have Whitlake, Assad, Lenny Pinto, who've all had high, moments that are impressive. Mark, 197.
197.
I got Ferrari at 1st and Buchanan at 3rd. Am I right or wrong?
Is AJ Ferrari in Iowa?
I'm putting him in.
Well, yeah, I'm going to say you're wrong right now because he's not there.
Let's say AJ Ferrari's somewhere in a lineup.
I would put AJ Ferrari the number 1. Wow, it's been 2 years. Yeah, I'd probably have him number 1. He's a returning national champ. Did not wrestle.
Well, it's not 2 years. It's the same time as Ridge Levitt.
I know.
Okay.
But by the time he gets back there, yeah. I would put him there. He's beaten Sloan. He's beaten Buchanan. He's
beaten Elam.
He's beaten everybody. So, yeah, he'd probably be preseason number 1.
Buchanan, over, under, Rocky. Do I have him right at 3rd?
I think you have him right at 3rd because Sloan was a runner-up. I think you give him that. Buchanan has not placed that high before. And then I would say Buchanan has beaten Rocky the last time out probably, so you'd have to give that nod to Buchanan.
Okay. 285. So one of the things that I'm glad that Mark and I are not compiling rankings are GT. It is so hard now to keep track of who's got extra years and all this stuff. Like, it's very, very difficult. So the people that are doing this, especially getting it right this early in the year, good for them. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are back. As Mark alluded to earlier, Lucas Davison would be the preseason number 4. You know, Colton Schultz is a guy that's taken second. I mean, he will be ranked where he's ranked, but he's a guy obviously with upside. Slavikowski is, back, and he will transfer because of the graduate situation. But, and I'll just say this, I'm super excited Wyatt Hendrickson is back. He's just super fun to watch, man. And, like, he doesn't wrestle like, first of all, I think heavyweight's really above where it's not a stand around and lean on you fest. But even like a guy like Kirkfleet, who's super athletic, Tony Cassiope, who does some nice things, Lucas Davison, who's a bulked up 197. Wyatt Henderson wrestles like 138 pounder in high school. Like he just does stuff that you're like, oh my God, how can you be that big and do stuff? So I'll share this real quick. I'm going to stop sharing and then go back and reshare a different tab here just so you guys can see this real quickly. We can finish on this. Okay, so this is from Flow. So if you look at the first set of columns, like Penn State's ranked number 1, they bring back 114. They lost 23.5. Missouri lost 3.5, etc. Now, this is obviously April 6th, so this is pre-portal. So, for example, if Iowa were to say add a Ferrari, they go right to number 2. You know, if any of these schools, like if Bernie Truax were to go to Arizona State, they go from 25 to, like, they're tied with South Dakota State for 8th. So I think what's amazing, like, people are talking about there's some holes in Penn State's lineup. I mean, yes and no. You look at the other columns, they bring back 14.5, 15.5, 18, 24, 23, and 19. And what they're so good at is getting a lot of points out of few weights, and then they do a better job of getting guys that didn't place, like, getting better at the beginning of the year. The one consistent, if you're going to pick one negative thing about Penn State, they haven't scored a lot of points at 125 in a while. But when you look at this, they don't need to. I mean, it looks very, very likely they're just going to score at least 100 points. And barring something crazy, it's going to be, difficult for a lot of other people to even get to 100 points. So, by the way, Mark, what was the final number you landed on the point spread, Penn State versus the field? And I think you were right. I think you said it was like 50, right?
Yes.
And if you had taken Penn State at minus 50, you would have won the bet.
Good to know now, David. Thanks. I could have made some real money.
Yeah. I'd have bet you wings on, me, I bet you wings on anything. So, all right. So we will stop sharing here. Let me see if there's any other last stuff. There's an article out. People should take a look at it about Jess Aroga. Long story short, I had told Mark about this months ago. Super high-level high school kid, Seabolt kid. Southeast Polk, I think. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. Like number 1 kind of guy in the country, wrestled in who's number 1. And just kind of decided he didn't want to wrestle anymore. Seems like he's really a piece in it. He's going to try to go into special forces, Navy SEALs, that kind of thing. And, it obviously creates an interesting situation for University of Iowa because they had signed him. And so now, they got to get some money back and find another guy at that weight class. And, when you recruit, you kind of try to build things like that. We will get more into the portal next week, but there are a bunch of guys here, like Mitchell Messenbrink is a really interesting guy that I think can make a difference. And then we'll talk more about international stuff, GT, which has no one at all in a kerfuffle. No one is upset at all about what UWW's decided recently. And then we'll only be really 1 week out, 2 weeks out from US Open next Thursday. So, we can start looking at the entries, U15s, U17s, U20s, Greco, women's and men's, and talk about that process. And then we can talk about the Pan Ams, who accepted their bids and what that means and all that kind of stuff. So anything else before you take off, boys?
Mark?
No, I think, one thing that did happen last week is David texted me, I think it was Saturday. He goes, "Hey, that Caitlin Clark from Iowa is a pretty good basketball player." Yeah, she's pretty good, David. So I
was obviously joking. I mean, great run for Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing what she was able to do.
Yeah, and I think you want to root for schools that have wrestling programs in these tournaments because there's money involved. And so whether or not you like whoever, it's better for Iowa to do well than LSU because some money comes back to the athletic programs in general. So yeah. So congratulations to all those, UConn and LSU for winning national titles. And GT, if you could get Nike to do the Kim Mulkey coaching line next year, I think that'd be great. You get some boas and some sparkles and some things like that worked in. So I know you're a man of the people and very popular up there, but that might raise your IG rating and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know who the Kim Mulkey of Division I wrestling would be or international wrestling, but would love to have a contest.
The person that would not be the Kim Mulkey is the Mongolian that disrobed over the call he was upset about. So.
Oh, I do have one thing before we sign off.
Okay.
Just posted by USA Wrestling that Jordan Burroughs is officially accepted his berth at 79 kg for Final X in Newark.
Okay, so that's awesome. And that brings up an interesting thing. Jaden did not accept his. Now, I don't know if
Jaden is entered at 97 kilos at the U.S. Open.
Right. Now, for people to understand that, he has to win the U.S. Open to make Final X to wrestle Snyder. I'm assuming that if he were to be upset there for some reason or get injured or something like that, he would accept the bid at 92 because then if he makes the world team and medals, that gets him into the semifinals of the Olympic trials at 24. So he sort of has a two-way go, and I know I've known Jaden since he was a kid. I recruited his brother. He's a Missouri guy, and I know he's a Nike athlete, and you've known him for a long time. One of the truly nicest human beings in our sport. But we'll talk a lot about that. But JB, accepting at 79 is awesome, and that ties to a lot of those athletes, male and female, wrestling at the Pan Am Games. So, ton of stuff. We're starting to get into GT's wheelhouse, Mark. He's been tolerating us in our soapboxes and ranking shenanigans for the last 4 months. And he's about to dust us. He's going to bring the full hair game and international and freestyling Greco-Roman knowledge. So the student already became the master when it came to the fantasy contest. He passed the old guys this year. We're coming for him next year, but we're about to ride shotgun here for the next couple months. But it's super enjoyable. I always learn a lot listening to Grant in April, May, June, and July for sure. So I know you guys too. We thank all you guys for watching and listening, and we will speak to you all next week.